In ancient Egypt, death did not signify the end of life. The Egyptians believed that the soul continued to live in the afterlife. Death was considered a natural part of life, and a detailed process involving various rituals and stages was initiated to ensure the deceased's continued existence in the other world. This process formed the foundation of Egypt's belief in the afterlife, with each stage being crucial for the person to lead a good life in the other world. In line with this belief, a series of complex rituals were performed to preserve both the bodies of the dead and ensure their souls' smooth passage to the afterlife. In this video, we will explore these processes in greater detail. When a person died in ancient Egypt, the two parts of the soul, Ba and Ka, were released. Ba represented the individual's character, traits, and personality, while Ka symbolized the life force. However, for the soul to live on in the afterlife, the body had to remain intact. The body was immediately kept cool to prevent decay. At the moment of death, the part of the soul known as Ba would leave the body. However, it was essential for the body to be preserved so that Ba could return. Therefore, the deceased's body was placed in a temporary tomb before the mummification process began. This tomb was a place where the body awaited without decaying, allowing the soul to return. The mummification process varied depending on the deceased's status. For someone of high status, the mummification process was much more meticulous and detailed. This process was vital for the Egyptians, who believed that preserving the body was necessary for immortality. The mummification process consisted of several steps. The first step was the careful removal of internal organs. The liver, lungs, stomach, and intestines were placed in 4 separate canopic jars. These jars were protected by the 4 sons of Horus, with each one representing a specific organ. The human-headed Imseti for the liver, the baboon-headed Hapi for the lungs, the jackal-headed Duamutef for the stomach, and the falcon-headed Kebesenuef for the intestines. The second step was the removal of the brain. The brain was extracted using an iron hook inserted through the nose. The Egyptians did not consider the brain very important, so it was usually discarded. The heart, however, was left inside the body. The Egyptians viewed the heart as the center of the soul. They believed it would play an important role when the person was judged in the afterlife. The third step was drying with natron. The body was completely covered with a natural salt mixture called natron and left to dry for 40 days. During this period, the body was completely dehydrated, preventing decay. Natron was used not only to dry the body, but also to disinfect it. After the body was dried, various steps were taken to form the mummy. The eyes were filled with stones resembling real eyes, and the cavities were stuffed with cloth pieces to maintain the body's original shape, making it appear lifelike. The body was completely wrapped in linen strips. These wrappings were repeatedly wound around the mummy, preserving the body's shape. Each layer of wrapping was done with spells and prayers, ensuring the mummy was protected by the gods. Amulets were placed on the linen, each one prepared with special spells to provide the deceased with strength and protection. After the mummy was prepared, a death mask representing the deceased's face was placed on it. These masks were often decorated with precious metals and stones. Masks made for pharaohs were typically made of gold. These masks ensured that the deceased would be recognized by the gods. The mummy was placed inside a series of nested coffins. The innermost coffin was human-shaped, adorned with spells and prayers written in hieroglyphs to protect the soul of the deceased. These coffins were highly detailed and ornate. The funeral was conducted in a procession. The deceased was transported along the Nile River on a boat, as the Egyptians believed the Nile was a passageway between life and death. During this procession, prayers and hymns were recited about the deeds the deceased had performed during their life. The ritual began with the symbolic opening of the mummy's mouth. Priests performed this ceremony using a knife or special tool, ensuring that the deceased could speak, eat, and breathe in the afterlife. This ritual was crucial for the deceased to be reborn into a new life. The tomb of the deceased was designed not only to preserve the body, but also to provide everything the soul might need in the afterlife. Items such as daily life essentials, food, drink, furniture, and even games were placed in the burial chamber. For the wealthy, these items included gold objects, precious stones, and even servant figures, shabti. Shabtis were small figures believed to work in place of the deceased in the afterlife. The Egyptians believed that the soul of the deceased would journey to an underworld called Duat. Duat was a place filled with dangerous creatures, challenging paths, and traps. To complete this journey, the Book of the Dead was placed in the tomb of the deceased. This book contained spells and instructions to guide the deceased through the journey. At the end of the journey, the soul would appear before Osiris for the weighing of the heart ceremony. In this ceremony, the heart of the deceased was weighed against the feather of Ma'at. Ma'at was the goddess of truth and justice, and the feather symbolized absolute truth. If the heart was heavier than the feather, it meant the person had committed bad deeds, and the soul would be devoured by a monster called Amit, resulting in the complete annihilation of the soul. However, if the heart was balanced with the feather, it showed that the person had lived a righteous life, and the soul would be admitted to the field of reeds, a paradise-like garden. After a successful judgment, the soul was admitted to Aaru. Aaru was a place of eternal life, a fertile paradise filled with rivers. Here, the deceased would be reunited with loved ones and live in eternal peace and happiness. For the Egyptians, this was the ultimate goal of death, to live an eternal life with the gods in the afterlife. In ancient Egypt, death was seen as the beginning of an eternal journey for the soul. Every stage of this journey was designed to ensure that the deceased would live a peaceful life in the afterlife. The details of these rituals demonstrate the Egyptians' strong belief in life after death and the sanctity of human life. The preservation, remembrance, and honoring of the deceased's soul were among the most important elements of Egyptian civilization. So, what do you think about the fact that the mummification process is considered such a detailed and sacred ritual? Don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments.